If you've been watching the programs on this channel, then you've seen a lot of artwork from ancient Mesopotamia. Often, I get questions from a number of you who are curious to know more about the stories behind these truly remarkable works of art. And so, I thought it'd be fun to do a series of programs on these truly magnificent masterpieces from Mesopotamia. Let's take a look at one of my favorite artifacts from ancient Mesopotamia, definitely in my top 3. And that's what we today call the Standard of Ur. It's called the Standard of Ur because when it was first discovered at the site of Ur in the 1920s, archaeologists led by Sir Charles Leonard Woolley thought it was a battle standard that may have been attached to a pole and carried by a soldier. In reality, we don't really know what the function of this box-like structure was. The so-called standard is inlaid on both sides with colorful mosaics that depict various aspects of life during the era that scholars call the early dynastic period of Sumer, which was roughly between 2900 to 2334 BC. The artifact itself dates to around 2550 BC. It's during the early dynastic period that we see lots of evidence, in terms of written texts and monuments, of the rise and fall of various dynasties ruling over the various city-states and small kingdoms of ancient Mesopotamia, especially in the southern part that we call Sumer. Made up of 2 panels that slope together and 2 triangular endpieces that are flattened at the top, the Standard of Ur is covered on both sides by 3 registers of mosaics that have been inlaid with lapis lazuli, pieces of shell, and red limestone. One side is called War, because it depicts what appears to be a king and soldiers returning from battle. The other side is called Peace, because it depicts a banquet celebration. The standard was buried in an area that Woolley called the Royal Cemetery of Ur. Within this space were several tombs and chambers, where many other valuable objects made of precious metals and stones were also discovered. In addition to these items were the graves and remains of over 2,000 people. Some of them are believed to have belonged to the royal family, but most seem to have been servants and soldiers who were sacrificed, either willingly or by force, so that they could be with and serve their king in the afterlife. Most scholars believe that they drank some type of poison before they died. But let's take another look at the standard. On the war side, top and center, we have this oversized man holding what appears to be a staff. He's surrounded by men who are believed to be military officers and soldiers. There are also several men in tattered clothing and various states of undress who are assumed to be prisoners of war. On the second level, we see more soldiers and prisoners. On the bottom level, we have soldiers riding in battle wagons that are being drawn by donkeys, a few of whom are trampling over the corpses of fallen enemies. This appears to be an army returning home after a military victory over a rival. The other side, Peace, shows a large banquet with the king and a bunch of his drinking buddies. In this case, probably nobles and other men of high status. The 2 levels below this depict scenes of servants, farmers, and some fishermen who seem to be supplying the banquet. Some have suggested that it could also depict the class structure or social hierarchy of the time period. At the top is the monarchy, an upper or elite class. In the middle are the merchants and tradesmen, and at the very bottom, the peasants who work in the fields. Perhaps this scene is of a banquet that was organized specifically to celebrate the military victory depicted on the standard's other side. Again, we don't know what the standard's true purpose was. Perhaps it was just some showpiece used to decorate a palace or a home. Or maybe a trophy presented to the king to commemorate victory over his rivals. Regardless, its depictions of some aspects of life in early dynastic Sumer are truly remarkable. The Standard of Ur is currently housed in the British Museum in London. Another one of my favorite pieces is a limestone plaque depicting the founder of the first dynasty of Lagash, King Ur-Nanshe. Discovered in Girsu, one of the 3 principal cities of the kingdom of Lagash, the relief probably served as a votive offering and was pegged to a wall of the temple of Ningirsu through the hole that you see through its center. Ningirsu was Lagash's patron deity. The main inscription on the plaque reads, Ur-Nanshe, king of Lagash, son of Ginidu, built the temple of the god Ningirsu. Along with Ur-Nanshe are his sons, who are all bald and beardless, making them appear like priests. The inscriptions written on them state that the 2 in the top row are Lugalzen and Gula, while those on the bottom include Akurgal, who succeeded Ur-Nanshe as king, and another son, Barasagnudi. The smallest figure is Anita, the royal cupbearer. Ur-Nanshe's reign was mostly peaceful and prosperous. Other, similar reliefs to this one tell of trade with places as far away as Dilmun, which today is modern Bahrain, as well as lands far to the east, such as parts of Afghanistan. However, his time on the throne also saw conflicts with neighboring cities such as Ur and Umma. The periodic wars with Umma raged on for the next few centuries until one of its kings, Lugal-Zaghazi, sacked the cities of the kingdom of Lagash, including Girsu, around the year 2340 BC. We're told by a later scribe of Lagash that Lugal-Zaghazi looted and desecrated the temple of Ningirsu, the place where this relief of Ur-Nanshe was likely housed. Lugal-Zaghazi would go on to conquer and unify the rest of Sumer under his banner, until he himself was overthrown by the next great king of Mesopotamia, whose likeness is possibly represented in the 3rd artifact that we're about to examine. As you can see, art helps us to tell a story. Thousands of years ago, stories were conveyed mostly orally or through clay, stone, and metal. Later on, there would be papyrus and the pages of books. But today, many, if not most stories, are shared through digital media and on platforms like YouTube. Being able to tell your story is extremely important, and so that's why I've partnered up with Skillshare, an online learning community with thousands of amazing classes and courses for creators. Skillshare is also the sponsor of this video. With Skillshare, you can explore new skills, deepen existing passions, and get lost in creativity. You can learn virtually any skill to help you unlock your creative potential, from photography, filmmaking, graphic design, Lightroom, Photoshop, and so much more. To help me out with producing these history videos, I checked out the course YouTube Success, Script, Shoot, and Edit with MKBHD, taught by my favorite tech YouTuber, Marcus Brownlee. I learned so many interesting tips about screenwriting and filming that will hopefully make these videos more enjoyable for you. If you've always wanted to start a YouTube channel or just learn the basics of Photoshop, then Skillshare is for you. And the first 1,000 viewers to click my link in the video description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium so that you can explore your creativity. After that, it's less than $10 a month. So go for it. Learn some new skills with Skillshare. Discovered in 1931 amongst the ruins of Nineveh in northern Iraq, this object, which is commonly referred to as the head or mask of Sargon, is a copper sculpture of the head of a king from the Akkadian dynasty, which at its height ruled over nearly all of Mesopotamia and parts beyond between the years 2334 to 2279 BC. Traditionally, this life-size head is believed to have been a portrait of King Sargon of Akkad, the founder of the world's first empire and one of the greatest rulers in all of ancient history. However, based on its artistic style, many archaeologists and art historians today believe that it may actually be a portrait of his grandson, Naram-Sin, who also ruled over an empire that at its height was probably even larger than Sargon's. Unfortunately, there's no inscription to be found anywhere on the head, so we can't be 100% certain as to who it depicts. What's clear from the workmanship and attention to detail especially with regard to the hair and the beard, is that this was a very important figure. Not a god, since there are no markings or the typical headdress that would generally mark one as being divine, but a man of great stature amongst the living. The head of Sargon, though, was not found at any known Akkadian site, but amongst the ruins of the Assyrian capital of Nineveh. The stories of just how it got there are quite numerous. The popular theory is that it was deemed to have been an object of great value, a sort of heirloom that was acquired by the kings of the Neo-Assyrian Empire and probably kept on display in a hall, temple, or perhaps the king's private museum. Even in those days, the object was ancient, at least 1,500 years old by the time it made it to Nineveh. Upon examining the head, though, it's quite clear that it's been deliberately mutilated. The ears have been cut off, the nose flattened, and one eye socket has been brutally gouged out. The head may have been even decapitated from a larger bronze body. Such actions were all common corporal punishments for criminals as well as defeated adversaries. The archaeologists who uncovered the head found it amongst a heap of rubble that dated to the 7th century BC, around the same time that a joint coalition of Medes and Babylonians sacked the city. Both of them despised the Assyrians, their overlords for decades, and in the Babylonians' case, centuries, until around 615 BC, when the tide turned and the Assyrian kings were forced to go on the defensive. In 612 BC, Assyria's great capital of Nineveh fell, and the Medes and Babylonians plundered and then razed the city to the ground. The head of Sargon, though damaged, survived the onslaught, at least somewhat. Today, it rests in the Iraq Museum in Baghdad. These are just 3 of ancient Mesopotamia's most amazing masterpieces. We'll take a look at other artifacts in future episodes. Thanks so much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. I'd also like to really thank GrandKick69, Yap de Graaf, Pasta Frola, Michael Lewis, Danielle Allen, Danny Vaneka, YNXTV, Robert Morgan, Frank, Faridun Dadachanji, Sher Kam, Farhad Kama, and all of the channel's patrons on Patreon for helping to support this and all future content. Check out the benefits to being a Patreon member, and if you'd like to join, feel free to click the link in the video description. You can also follow History with Sai on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, as well as continue to listen to special audio programs on the History with Sai podcast. Thanks again, and stay safe.